He said it himself, on the radio, before the stewards even opened the investigation. If this was our mistake, then it was our mistake. Hold that thought, because it matters more than the penalty that followed it. Saturday in Budapest ended with Lando Norris on pole by 12 thousandths of a second, and by the time the headlines settled, 3 different cars had been shuffled up and down the Hungarian Grand Prix grid. But the story that actually matters isn't the lap time. It's what happened in the seconds before Lewis Hamilton drifted across the racing line at turn 1, and what the man running Ferrari said about it once the cameras stopped rolling on the podium and started rolling on the radio. Here's the sequence, stripped of noise. Hamilton had just finished a flying lap and was cruising back to the pits, sitting on provisional pole. He believed by his own admission that every other car on a hot lap had already crossed the line. He hadn't. Oscar Piastri was still out there, still pushing, still trying to snatch a position from the 2 Ferraris in front of him. And Hamilton, dawdling on the racing line with no idea Piastri was 30 car lengths behind him, forced the McLaren wide, killed the lap, and ended Piastri's afternoon in that session before it had a chance to finish. If you want the stories the paddock doesn't put in the press releases, subscribe right now, and drop a comment telling me which country you're watching from, because what happens after this radio call hits differently depending on where you're sitting. The stewards didn't take long. 3-place grid penalty for Hamilton, dropping him from 2nd to 5th. Then, in a twist almost nobody saw coming, Kimi Antonelli picked up his own penalty for a separate incident involving a yellow flag he didn't fully respect. Same weekend, same session, 2 penalties, and the net effect was 1 driver climbing the order without touching another car all day. Piastri. Now here's where it gets interesting, because the version of this story everyone's writing treats it as a steward's decision. A penalty applied, a grid corrected, case closed. That's not the story. The story is what came over the radio before the stewards had even opened their file. This is not a rival engineer briefing a reporter after the fact. This is not paddock gossip dressed up as insight. This is the head of the team on an open channel in real time, conceding fault before anyone forced him to. We told him, but we told him too late. And if this was our mistake, then it was our mistake. That is not a man defending his driver. That is a man doing the arithmetic on blame before the stewards do it for him. Was Hamilton alone in his mirrors? Yes. Was he told a car was approaching? Not until it was already at the apex behind him. Did the team believe every other driver had finished their laps? Apparently yes, and they were wrong. Was there any indication from the radio traffic that Ferrari treated this as Hamilton's error rather than their own? None. Every single admission ran the other way. Keep that shape in your head because it comes back. Fred Vasseur has built a reputation this season as a calm hand on a chaotic pit wall. The man who doesn't flinch when Ferrari's strategy gets picked apart in real time. Verificar. Attribution of the radio concession to Vasseur personally versus a race engineer relaying the team's position is based on broadcast audio and has not been independently confirmed by a named source. Whoever's voice it was, it came from the top of that pit wall, and it said, in effect, we own this. That kind of concession, unprompted before the stewards even summoned anyone, is rare enough in this sport that it deserves more attention than a single line buried under a penalty headline. So let's put it next to something else that happened on the same pit wall in the same session a few minutes earlier. Hamilton, sitting on provisional pole, was sent out first for the final runs. He said afterward he didn't think that was the right call. That going out first cost him track conditions Norris ultimately used to steal the pole by 12 thousandths of a second. One call, going out first, cost him the pole. A second call, failing to warn him in time, cost the team a driver's grid position outright and handed a temporary advantage to another team's car. Neither decision on its own looks like a firing offense. Put them side by side in the same session, and you start to see a pit wall that got 2 consecutive strategic reads wrong, on a day the team desperately needed neither. That's the caso espejo here, and it's an uncomfortable one for Ferrari, because it isn't a rival saying it. It's their own radio. And if you're not subscribed yet, this is the exact kind of story you'll want to be here for when it happens again. Because pit walls that get one call wrong under pressure tend not to stop at one. Let's talk about what this actually costs, in real terms, because 5 seconds or 3 grid places always sounds smaller than it is. A 3-place drop from 2nd to 5th doesn't just cost Hamilton track position. It puts him behind a car he was faster than all weekend, on a circuit where overtaking is notoriously difficult, on a Sunday where track position often is the race, That's not a rounding error. That's the difference between fighting for a win and fighting to salvage points. And on the other side of that same radio failure sits Oscar Piastri, who watched his own final lap disappear because of somebody else's mistake and responded from the cockpit with a sarcastic thumbs up aimed directly at Hamilton's car. He told reporters afterward that it was, in his words, pretty bad, that he'd watched Hamilton the entire way up the straight, expecting him to move, and he never did. Piastri wasn't hiding how he felt. Neither, in the end, was Ferrari. So here's the question worth sitting with. If you're Fred Vasseur and your own pit wall handed a rival driver a golden opportunity through a communication failure your team has already admitted to, do you protect the driver who was on track, or do you protect the muscle memory that got you there? There's no comfortable answer. Pick one. That's a defensible position either way, and I'll say that plainly because pretending Ferrari had no legitimate explanation would be dishonest. Hamilton had just completed a fast lap. He believed the field had cleared. His mirrors, by his own account, never showed him a McLaren closing at over 100 kilometers an hour. That is a real, human, understandable mistake to make in a cockpit. It is also not the mistake that survives the comparison with what the team radio was saying in the background the entire time. Would this have happened if the pit wall had relayed the warning 10 seconds earlier? Almost certainly not. Is that proven beyond doubt from the outside? No. And I'm not going to pretend it is. It's simply a question anyone watching that radio exchange is entitled to ask, and Ferrari's own words on the open channel didn't do much to talk anyone out of asking it. What comes next is the part nobody in the paddock wanted written down in black and white. Before I give it to you, subscribe, because this story has a second half, and it plays out over the next few race weekends, not just this one. Here's the structural piece, because this isn't really about one radio call. It's about what happens when a pit wall is managing two title-contending drivers in the same garage, trying to protect both of their interests in real time, and gets the sequencing wrong under pressure. That's not unique to Ferrari. It's the exact tension that sat under every two-car title fight in this sport for decades. The moment where a team has to choose, in seconds, who gets the benefit of the doubt. This weekend, nobody got it. Hamilton lost the call to go out first. Piastri lost the lap Hamilton blocked. And the team, by its own admission, lost the plot on communication timing twice in the same session. We've talked about this kind of pit wall breakdown on this channel before. The exact pattern where a strategic call and a communication failure compound in the same window and cost more than either would alone, and it rarely stays a one-off when the underlying pressure that caused it doesn't go away. Do I know for certain this changes how Vasseur manages that pit wall going forward? No. And that's exactly the point, because if even the people running the strategy can't tell you in the moment who made the call, then the standard the team is operating under isn't really a standard yet. Here's the verdict. Ferrari didn't get outmaneuvered by a rival this weekend. They got outmaneuvered by their own radio. Fred Vasseur said the quiet part out loud before the stewards forced his hand, and that kind of unprompted honesty is rare enough to matter. But it doesn't erase the fact that his own pit wall handed a title rival a golden opportunity through pure sequencing error, twice in the same session. That's not bad luck. That's a pattern with a paper trail. So tell me, was Vasseur's honesty on the radio a sign of a team that owns its mistakes, or a sign of a pit wall that's making too many of them to hide? Drop your verdict, and hit like if you already know which one it is. Budapest race is next, and the same pit wall that got this session wrong now has to manage two Ferraris and a title fight through 70 laps, with zero margin for another sequencing error. Whatever happens on that radio channel tomorrow decides whether this was a one-off or the start of a very long conversation about who's actually in control of that garage. This story is not over, and when the next call gets made under pressure, you'll want to already have this file open. Hit subscribe, hit like, and I'll see you in the comments. Until the next one.